extremist groups, members, and safe havens than at any time in history.
That is John Clapper, who testified on Capitol Hill yesterday that ISIS was likely to attempt some type of direct hit on the U.S. within the next 12 months. ABC terrorism analyst John Cohen, formerly an undersecretary and an analyst at the Department of Homeland Security, joins us to talk about it. Good morning, John Cohen.
Good morning.
Were you surprised by what John Clapper said yesterday?
Well, I was a little surprised because not so much with the substance, but this is probably the starkest and most disconcerting assessment of a threat I've heard DNI Clapper provide. And I think what it illustrates is that the consensus has been reached in Washington that the ISIS threat is real, it's here, and it's something we need to deal with.
Is it going to be, and I guess we don't know this, but is it going to be homegrown, or is it going to be from an outside coming in?
Well, that's the key question. So what ISIS has been able to accomplish is that they've projected a global presence by acquiring territory and resources in Iraq and Syria, forming alliances with other regional terrorist organizations in Africa and in the Middle East. But as your question points out, they've also used a sophisticated social media campaign to recruit individuals in Europe, the United States, and Canada to either travel to Syria and Iraq and join their cause or act independently at home. We've seen a number of incidents in Europe and the United States where people who have become inspired by the ISIS ideology have operated independent of the group in carrying out acts of violence. And that is a threat that our traditional counterterrorism capabilities was never designed to deal with.
So what is the benefit of the American public knowing this? What are we supposed to do with this information?
Well, the American public is a big part of our ability to detect and prevent these types of attacks. We've all heard the campaign, if you see something, say something, but it's more than that. It's that we have to build greater capability at the local level where when somebody sees something, local authorities have the ability to assess the risks posed by a threat and then take steps to prevent that threat from occurring. Again, what the director's statements yesterday really illustrate is that we can't simply rely on our robust intelligence capabilities to pick up on all elements of this threat. There may be people in communities across the country who may be inspired by the ideology, willing to commit an attack on its behalf, but are operating under the radar screen of our intelligence community.
Why not work? Maybe this is more of a politic question than a national security question, but ISIS clearly wants their own land, and their land was kind of taken from them when Iraq crumbled, and the Sunnis don't have a homeland. What's wrong with sort of dividing up Iraq to have some type of Sunni homeland to sort of lessen the problem? Is that at all possible going forward?
Well, again, key question. I think there was a lot of discussion, several years back about how you could structurally, create sort of enclaves within Iraq and Syria that would give, Sunnis and Shias and Kurds, their own autonomous areas. The problem or the challenge we face now is that this turbulent situation in Iraq and Syria have essentially grown out of control. And while something that could have worked, there are a number of concepts that could have worked years past that we've gone too far down the road. And now we are facing, just from ISIS alone, not even talking about Al-Qaeda, but just from ISIS alone, an organization that has essentially created a global presence, which they fund and operate out of these territories that they now control in Iraq and Syria.
In terms of an attack, as giant and as tragic as 9/11, or every attack's awful, but something smaller, do we have any idea what they're looking at?
Yeah, thus far what we've seen is that ISIS is promoting its followers to carry out smaller scale types of attacks, similar to what we saw in San Bernardino, or attacks such as we've seen in New York, where you had individuals attacking police officers, with knives or with hatchets, or Philadelphia, where an individual, allegedly on behalf of the ISIS ideology, attacked an individual, a police officer sitting in his police car. So I think that up to this point, what we've seen is mostly active shooter or smaller scale attacks being carried out by inspired people. That doesn't mean that these are small problems. To the people and the family members who were associated with the victims in San Bernardino, whether this was a 9/11 scale attack or whether it was a smaller scale attack is basically irrelevant.
ABC terrorism analyst John Cohen, former undersecretary and analyst at the Department of Homeland Security, talks about John Clapper's testimony, which scared and shocked just about everybody yesterday. John, thanks for checking in.
It was great being with you. Thanks.
8:56 here, Big 550 KTRS.